Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today we're going to give our hot take review on the game we just finished playing, Furnace. But before we jump into a description of the game, we got some poll results to discuss. I posted a poll on Twitter about traveling with games. So I said I spent a long weekend with friends in Sedona and seeing the Grand Canyon. And of course I packed some games and we got them played in between other activities. So I asked people, do you bring games when you go on vacation? So what about you guys? Adam, do you travel with games typically if you're traveling with family or with Sarah or?
Occasionally, if I think about it, when I'm going to visit my family or I'm going down to hang out with Sarah, I'll bring a board game or two, and hopefully we get to the table if there's time. I'm not going to try to force it on anybody, but in the back of my head, I'm like, please let me find an opportunity to play this board game. Please let me. So yes, I'm a big proponent of bringing board games on little trips, and I'm trying to find the perfect size ones. It's nice to have something kind of smallish that can fit in a little bag or a little card game that works well. So yes, I like the idea of board games on vacation.
Yeah, what about you, Chris?
Yeah, I haven't really been on a vacation in I don't know how long, or you could describe it as my entire last year was spent on vacation. And so when I moved across country, we brought a bunch of games with us because we were going to be on the road for 8 months. And so I wanted to have some things to play. And we did get them played quite a bit. So that was quite a success, I thought. We haven't been on a trip in a while, though. But since we've started, since we moved here, there's been a lot more, game playing in the household. And so I think that when we do start actually taking smaller trips, like what you might think of as a long weekend or a vacation, I think we will. And I think we'll actually get them on the table as well.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. Yeah. So like this last trip I just took with my wife and Jen, who, we always play games together anyway. So it was pretty easy. We picked up a couple things. In fact, we were in a VRBO, and it was right next to the Grand Canyon, and it was right next to this big train station outside of Harrison, I think is the name of the city, but it's right outside the Grand Canyon. So it's kind of famous for the train that you can take from there to other places. And the little VRBO we rented was all decorated like a train, it had all kinds of train stuff, but they had an old copy of Ticket to Ride in there. So we actually played that at that location. But we had some other games that we brought to our VRBO in Sedona and played those. I always bring games with me, but sometimes it's like a total waste because we went to Hawaii 2 months ago and I brought 6 games and we didn't play a single one. We were too busy. It never happened. So, sometimes you pack all these things, you bring them across country and it never happens. So that's no fun, but it's nice to have something to do in downtime.
I feel like you have to be kind of realistic about what kind of trip it's going to be and whether it's the kind that's going to be conducive to gaming because, you go for a long weekend to the Grand Canyon. There's going to be time spent out during the day, hiking around and getting tired. Then you're going to come back at night. And it's the perfect time to play a board game. You go to Hawaii, nobody wants to sit inside and play board games when you're in Hawaii, so I can kind of get that.
Well, I think it would have worked normally, except this was for my brother-in-law's wedding. They had a small group of family members and stuff there. So every evening when Danielle and I would have been settling in and would have just looked for some downtime to do, we were, spending time with the family. So I think that's what got in the way on this particular trip. But
So Tim, when you're bringing these games with you, are they like big old full-size games, or are they like deck of card size, like love letter size? How big are these games?
Yeah, I've brought full games. I brought Mage Knight to India with me on a business trip. But what I did is I took all the components. Mage Knight has a way oversized box. I took all the components, put them in baggies and in a little bag and wrapped it up and just put the cardboard pieces in a little sleeve. And so it doesn't take up that much space if you get rid of the big boxes. In this case, I actually brought a few full-size games with me to Sedona. As I did that to Hawaii as well and just packed a bigger bag. So sometimes I just do the full boxes. It's nice to try to find something that's a little bit smaller, but not necessary. If you want to get a big game in your luggage, you can get it in there.
I can just picture Adam bringing his extra suitcase just so he can bring the full complement of Eclipse with him.
Gotta bring all the Eclipse stuff with me everywhere I go.
So here's what people on Twitter responded. So 43% said, yes, I do bring them and I play a lot, which is pretty much what I usually manage to pull off on a vacation. 46% said yes, but don't play much. So that's what happened to me in Hawaii. And then only 7% said no, but I should. So they haven't brought games, but are thinking about it. And then 4% said no, need a break. So they just want to go on vacation and get away from their hobby. I don't understand that. That's nonsense. The little bit of free time we have, I want to be playing games, even if it means I'm in a different location. So I always bring them, hoping to get them played. Yeah, like organized fun set on here. For me, it depends who the trip is with. Friends, then definitely all the games, but family, not so much. So yeah, it depends. Like Adam said, it kind of depends on who you're with and whether anyone else is going to be playing games with you. So that makes a lot of sense. All right, well, let's jump into a description of Furnace. In Furnace, you're playing as 19th century capitalists, buying factories and trying to run them as efficiently as possible to make the most money. The game is played over 4 rounds that each consist of an auction phase and a production phase. Each round there will be 4 factories more than the number of players placed in a row in the middle of the table, which represents the factories available for auction. During the auction phase, you will take your 4 bidding discs of your color with the numbers 1 through 4 printed on them, and in player order will place one of them on one of the factories available for auction. The disc cannot be placed on a factory that already has a disc of the same color or has a disc with the same number printed on them. After all bidding discs have been placed, the auction will resolve from left to right. The player with the highest number disc will take control of that factory and add it to their personal tableau, while the rest of the players that placed a disc on that factory will get compensation equal to the number of their discs and with a value that is printed on the top of the factory card. For example, if the factory had 2 coal printed as the compensation value, a player that played a 4 disc on that space would take the factory, while the player that placed their 2 disc on it would get 2 times the compensation value, or 4 coal. After the auctions have all been resolved, then the players will simultaneously activate each of their factory cards in any order they choose. The factories generally allow the players to generate 1 or more of the 4 resources, coal, iron, oil, or upgrade tokens, convert resources into other resources, or convert resources into coins, which are used to represent points in the game. Each player also has a starting factory that will produce an upgrade token and will allow them to spend resource tokens to upgrade other factories. When a factory is upgraded, you flip the card over to display upgraded factory benefits. Each player also starts with a unique player power that may improve their production or auction capabilities. After all players have finished their production phase, then you set up for the next round's auction. The game is played over 4 rounds, and the player with the most coins at the end of the 4th round production phase is the winner. Furnace was designed by Ivan Lashin and is published by Arcane Wonders. All right, so let's talk about the gameplay and mechanisms of Furnace. And just for a little background here, Chris and I played 2 games tonight. Adam bought and owns this game and played one of the 2 games with us tonight and played some learning games on his own. So that's kind of our level of experience coming into tonight's games. So Adam, why don't you start? You bought this game. Tell us what got you excited about Furnace. Why did you pick it up?
First, I want to say that description was scorching. So I picked up this game because it looked relatively simple and lightweight. It's designed by Ivan Lashin, and he did Smartphone, which I'm a big fan of Smartphone. And I think somebody asked a question about what's been going on at Gen Con this year, and I read one thing from one guy who was at Gen Con and said Furnace was pretty hot. So I was like, so I looked into it. Ivan Lashin, a simple game of the auction. I like these little auction. And then the engine building, and that's pretty much it. So there's this interactive auction, and then followed by this, you see how well you did, and you build your engine, and you turn that into, so it seemed simple mechanics, not much to do, quick setup, light rules overhead, everything I'm kind of looking for in a game right now. Plays in under an hour, and so I wanted to see if the depth of gameplay was there too. So that's what was turning me on to Furnace.
Cool. So anything, now that you've played it, anything that you want to talk about, gameplay mechanisms wise?
Sure. So the first thing that comes at you is the auction, and that's pretty unique. You have these the 4 different tokens, and there's these rules. Each person has a different, industrialist or capitalist, I guess, and you're putting these tokens out on the different buildings, and it's pretty interactive. You can't replicate the same number usually that somebody else has. So there's all these different rules. And you're kind of looking at, I feel like the more you play, you're going to be looking at what other people are building. You're going to try to counter their engine. There's a lot of tacticalness and strategery in this as you go along, and you try to counter other people's engines. So that auction mechanism is something I want to highlight.
Yeah, I really like the auction here, and I'm not usually a big fan of auctions, but this did a couple things that I think worked really well. One was that the people who lose the auction still get a benefit for it. And a lot of the time, that was even you wanted to lose an auction because you really just wanted to get the what did they call it the
compensation.
The compensation for losing that auction because you just needed the resources in order to run some other part of your engine. And so that was a really cool choice. And sometimes you'd put a lower number hoping that somebody else bought the card, and then you'd get stuck with it and you couldn't even use it because you really just wanted the compensation. So it made for some really interesting decisions. But also, even if you did want a card, if you lost it, there's a good chance you got something that you could use later in the game or for some other part of your engine. The fact that, everybody has 4 chips, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can't put one of the same number down on a card to auction for it, and you can't put one of the same color, so you can't bid your own. It's really easy to see what's available for you to bid on based on the tokens you have left. And it's a tough choice about which token you use at which point. And just, really fun, streamlined, really simple to run, but really fun decisions during that part. What do you think of the auction, Chris?
I mean, the auction certainly was the centerpiece of this game. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There's actually 2 centerpieces, the auction and the engine building, and they are so pure in their form for each of those. I thought it was really interesting, and one of the things that I just want to point out was that there's really sort of three things you can accomplish during the auction phase. One is you're looking at the compensation that Tim was just talking about. Another is looking at the factories as a source of income. What income do I want to get? Or I should say, what production do I want to get? What resources do I want to get out of it? And then the third thing is there are also factories that give you scoring opportunities. So essentially turning your resources into points. So you're really looking at 3 different things. And Steve pointed out at the end of the game after we played the second one that you kind of want to focus the beginning game on building up your engine with your resources. And then the second part is finding ways to capitalize on that by getting scoring out of it. So in this auction piece, you're really thinking about a whole lot of different things happening in at different points of the game. And if you like the auction mechanism, you're going to love this game. If you don't, you're going to really dislike this game because it is so much of the game in a way that, at least for me, I had not seen before. And so this was kind of a new experience for me. I mean, I've seen games where we did have auction aspects. Pan Am is kind of an auction light. But I'm curious, have you guys seen other games like this where the auction aspect is such a large part of the game?
Yeah, there's a lot of games. There's a lot of games that are based around auction, but the ones that I've played in the past, I haven't enjoyed that much. And for me, even though I'm not a big fan of auctions, I didn't feel like, it just wasn't as painful if you lost an auction, and that's a problem with a lot of auction games. It's like you're bidding, you don't know who you're bidding over, how much you're giving up, maybe you're overbidding, and then if you lose it, maybe you give up your money. Like there are games that are really punishing like that in an auction situation, and this was more. Like everything was on the table. You knew what people could overbid on you. You knew what there was already out there to bid against. And you knew what the risk was. If you didn't win that building, what are you going to get out of it? Or if you do win the building instead of getting the compensation, can you use it? So I don't know. To me, it definitely, it was an auction but it felt more painless, more fun to me than most auctions do personally. What about you, Adam? I think you like auctions, right?
I do, as long as there's some kind of, interesting twist to it. And this one was just so clean and clever and easy to understand, but there's a lot of depth to it too. So yeah, I very much enjoyed the auction. And then the way the auction resolves too is another aspect of it. For a 4-player game, you got these 8 cards out there and the resolve left to right. So part of this auction too is, okay, I want to get this stuff on the left, and then maybe over here I can get compensated on the right side of the auction board and change that stuff I just got from the left side of the board into some higher, value commodity. So I like the way that resolved. It's just very clever and clean, easy to understand, easy to follow, but the depth that emerges from that is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, following on for that, like we started the game tonight and Chris didn't get a chance to watch the gameplay video or read the rules before we started. And what did it take me, like 2 minutes, Chris, to teach you? Like this game is so easy to teach and so easy to understand. And there's really no, we never had to look at the rule book. There's no ambiguity in the rules or how anything works, even though a lot of it's iconography based. It's really simple iconography. So yeah, that was nice. So I want to talk about one other item, and you guys may jump into the engine building, but the thing that I actually thought was kind of neat was the decision about how to use those upgrade tokens. So everybody started with one starting factory, and the starting factories all produced one upgrade token when you ran your engine, and then they all allowed you to convert any number of upgrade tokens to upgrade other buildings. And I thought that was a fun decision because there were also cards that let you turn those upgrade tokens into points. And so it wasn't necessarily always the right decision to upgrade your factories, but sometimes that was the only way you're going to get access to the best point conversion part of your engine or some of the best resource stuff. So like I had a real struggle this game where the first round I managed to pick up a factory that converted a upgrade token to 5 points, which I should have probably been doing the whole time. But I really wanted to upgrade other buildings so I could get other point opportunities. And so I think I threw away 15 or 20 points, but maybe I gained others for it. So it was a really tough decision every turn. I think that's interesting. Plus, just upgrading the factories is fun. It's just fun to know that, hey, this factory does something at base, but then I've got all these choices, this menu of choices I can do to turn these things into other stuff. So that was fun for me. What about you, Chris? Any other mechanisms that really stood out to you?
I really enjoyed the engine building aspect of it because it was relatively simple to do. You talked about the upgrade tokens, and there's sort of two different ways you're building up. One by adding factories to your tableau, and the other is by taking the factories you've already got in your tableau and upgrading them. And there was no particular thing that you had to do that felt particularly epic. Like you had to save up for an hour to get to this one big move that you were going to do. You really could do your upgrades in a pretty smooth, kind of regular way. It was a little bit frustrating, I thought, at a couple points, trying to find ways to convert the resources into points. You want to focus your early game on getting resources and your later game on scoring. One of the things that I found that was a little bit frustrating was if you focused the beginning on getting resources, you could build up a great collection of resource building factories, but then you have to rely later on in the game on the right point scoring factories to come out, and it can either be a treasure or it can be an absolute disaster depending on what comes out later. And certainly you can pivot your goals and your strategy to try to accommodate that. But I did feel like there was a little bit of a luck aspect there that was probably a little bit more than I would have liked.
Was that because of the 10 iron you had left on the table at the end of the game because you didn't find a way to convert them to points?
Well, actually, the two games we played I thought were a great example of this. Well, I'll call it a problem. It's not necessarily a problem. I mean, every game has some luck, and maybe it's a problem, maybe it's not. But the first game I won, and then the second game I came in dead last. And I don't feel like I played, really well the first time and really did a bad job the second time. I feel like in the first game, it was serendipitous. Just everything fell into place. I got the right resources at the beginning of the game, and then I was able to maneuver into the right point scoring at the end of the game. And that was great. But in the second game, I felt like, I had this great engine of resources built up at the beginning of the game. And then try as I might, there was just it didn't feel like the opportunities were coming up to convert that into points later on in the game. So, you can only do so much to reduce the luck aspect of the game. But, it was definitely, it affected my experience.
Yeah, and one thing I would just mention on that is that, you bought a factory that created an iron, and then you could upgrade it to create another 2 iron. And you made a decision early to upgrade that because it seemed potentially good, but you also could have said, hey, I don't have a way to use this iron yet, so maybe I'll use my upgrade token for something else instead of producing all that iron. So there was a choice to be made there that wasn't just dependent on the luck. Obviously, if you'd gotten lucky and picked up an iron plant or something that converted to points with iron later, that would have been really beneficial for you. But I personally, I didn't feel like this game was super luck focused. I thought it was super mathy. I thought if you planned out like, what can I do with these resources I bought this round, and then in the auction the next time, figure out how I'm going to use them, and almost to a fault. Like I think that was its biggest flaw, to be honest, is that it's a very streamlined game and very easy to play. But I just felt like I spent so much time just like not doing the fun parts, which was auctioning or running the engine, but more like planning out how is this engine going to go. And that's okay. It worked out just fine. It just was a little, dry and mathy. It took a little bit of the fun away from it, I think.
I agree, Tim. If you wanted to, you could spend all day long organizing your engine in the right order to make sure this cascades into this, into this, into this. And I have 2 coal left over. Let me rearrange this whole thing so I use everything to score maximum amount of points. So you can run it like that if you want to. That's not how I prefer to play this one. I'm going to see like what kind of flows, and all right, this looks good here, this looks good here, boom, 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 that's pretty good. And I have these resources left over. Next round, how can I use those leftover resources to turn that into some more money in the bank? So maybe that last round especially is going to be mathed out, and you're trying to use every single resource. Now, what Chris was saying, I felt like at the beginning, you had a choice, right? You could pick a card, a factory that had some scoring options on the bottom and maybe upgrade that later. So that would give you kind of a goal to go towards, or you'd have some options. And that's kind of what I was trying to do, was pick a few factories that gave me some nice resource production. Maybe later I'd upgrade them to be able to get some points and give myself a few different directions to go. So I think that's all part of the strategy of the game, is figuring out which way you want to go and leaving yourself options and being able to pivot when you need to.
Yeah, and Chris, I'm not saying that what you're saying isn't valid at all. Like, there is some luck. You made a call that you hoped paid off, and it didn't pay off for you. So there was a little bit of luck into what came up. It could have worked out a lot better for you that time. You had bad feelings from that last play. I don't think this game is super luck dependent. I think it's a lot about just like making the right decisions and building on top of things. So, just that happened, I think, to be a particularly extreme situation, what happened to you with the resources versus the ability to convert them later.
Yeah, and it might be different. You go through multiple plays and you learn more about the cards and you learn more about what is valuable and what's not valuable. And maybe after a few games, I'd feel differently about it overall. But it's a bad experience when you feel like you start out with something that so clearly, I mean, we all talked about that card at the beginning and said, oh man, that's the card. Everybody wants that card, because everything that I'd seen from the game previous to that says, yep, iron is worth a lot. You can get a lot of benefit out of that. And so get the iron, and then to spend the whole second game trying to claw every single point that I can get out of this overabundance of something. And I tried to diversify, but at that point the diversification options were dwindling. So, and maybe that was just, I feel like really what happened there was two extreme versions that I saw. The one where kind of everything I did just fell into place, and the second one where I felt like there was nothing that I could do to salvage that game. And again, part of that may be an experience, but to some degree, when you feel like the path is kind of predetermined in a situation like that, it affects the experience.
Here I'm going to turn to the length of the game, and that's where I become more appreciative of a game that's like under an hour, 45 minutes, where if you do have that kind of experience, well, it's over in half an hour, 45 minutes, and you can rerun it, or you can just ignore it and never play it again if you don't like it. So
yeah. And that was nice. I agree.
And I think this really is a 30 to 45 minute game once everybody knows what they're doing. I mean, maybe four of us, people were thinking hard and taking some time on their turn. So maybe we ran into an hour here, but I think you can definitely knock this out in 30, 45 minutes with a few people that know it, 2 or 3 people that know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So that is really nice. What do you guys think about the unique asymmetric player powers that, everybody started with one, capitalist or industrialist or whatever, that kind of had their own ability? Anything that stood out to you there? Like, did you feel like they were fun? Did you feel like they were overpowered?
I feel like that adds some nice variety to the game. It'd be pretty stagnant, kind of boring if it was all the same. So it adds a nice little flavor, some nice little salt to an already solid game. That's, and they weren't crazy. It's not your Cthulhu Wars type asymmetry. It's kind of more your Terraforming Mars type asymmetry, where each one just does, some little rule breaking thing, and it's cool. It's interesting. You kind of can play off that and try to build your strategy using that character. That was neat.
Yeah, I thought that was fun. I liked that, and like Adam said, it was not these huge swings, but it definitely added some interest to it. Like I enjoyed both of the powers that I had.
Yeah, so I was going to say the same thing. Both the ones that I played, I personally enjoyed both of them, and I was seeing what you guys were playing. I was like, that would be fun to play too. So they were all pretty fun. It would be nice, I think, if there were more than I think there was just 5 in the box. Or 6. So a little more variety would have been nice, and it seems like there's an opportunity to do that. You also had the variety on the starting factory cards, but they were pretty negligible difference there. Like one other type of resource you could convert and maybe one different starting resource. So that didn't change things a lot. But
I think this game's ripe for expansion, and there's already been a few calls for some more variety in the starting power, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I could see that. And that's going to lead me to my last comment on the gameplay, and that I did feel it was a little dry. I mentioned the mathiness of it, and that might have been part of it, but it really was, your traditional turn one resource into another resource. And I liked the way the auction flowed, and I liked the way that the engine, ran, but it wasn't that interesting to watch it all happen, I guess. It's converting coal to iron and iron to oil and oil to points, etc. And there was something about it that just felt a little bit maybe, I don't know. I don't know what it is exactly. Maybe just a little too dry. I don't know if a different theme would have helped or something else, but there was something about it that just left me feeling a little bit like, not super excited.
Here is my counter to that. I feel like this is a Euro game. Instead of watching Tim take his action and convert 9 resources to this thing, and then watching Chris take his turn and turn into 3 of these and 4 of those and 5 of those into 8 points. You do the auction, you get your factories, and everybody's just doing their resource conversion on their own little area. You don't have to waste time watching people do their resource conversion. You can just do it on your own. I freaking love that. Like, if I'm going to do a Euro game, I like it like this. I don't want to... That's my counter to that, Tim.
Yep.
So, but I do see that the theme could be a little dull.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on there that I agree. In theory, the auction was fun. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the little puzzle that was happening there. And I thought the engine was clean and it ran smoothly. I think it was probably theme more than anything else that just didn't get me too excited. I read the rules and watched a gameplay video and I was like, this game is going to be awesome. It's right up my alley. And there are some other games that are kind of similar. So like Century Spice Road is a great example. I swear this was taken right off the page there, except instead of playing the engine out of your hand, you're playing it, out on the table. Otherwise, the resource conversion of it is the same, and that's also dry. But then you put on the Century Spice Road Golem Edition, and all of a sudden that's so much more fun of a game, just because there's cooler artwork and it's more like an interesting story that's happening. And I think that's really where this failed for me, was just the theme on it, the industrialism of it. Just not, I don't know. It was just boring to kind of, I'm running this engine and what is it doing? It's converting fuel sources to points. I don't know. I didn't, there's something about it that just felt.
Write a letter to Ivan Lashin and tell him not to make games about smartphones or in capitalists.
I got to back Tim on this one. I mean, what was that poll we did a little while back? Like the themes that you're most over.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times does this one, early industrialization, how many times does that have to be done? Brass Birmingham, blah, 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 blah. It's pre-industrial Europe that kind of everybody's sick to death of. And then every once in a while you get a game that truly is unique. And then you see something like this where there's a lot of fun to be had in there, but the theme doesn't do anything to help that. It's still a fun game, but the theme didn't do it any favors.
Yeah, agreed. And I think this game is much better than Century Spice Road. I think it's evolved and it's more interesting. The interaction is great. I think the gameplay itself is really cool, but I think it fails there. And then another game that we played recently that reminded me of one of these simple engine builders was Aquatica. That one also had some unique mechanisms, so maybe the mechanisms themselves even stood out, but I think the theme there was so much more fun than this. I don't know. That I think that's all it is. That's all I can point to, because I think the mechanisms were fine. I just thought the theme was so dry that it kind of suffered a little bit.
I can't disagree with you guys on that. The theme was a little...
Right. Well, we're talking about the theme, so why don't we just jump right into the theme and production here. If you have anything else to mention on theme, feel free. But Adam, why don't you start with the production, since you own a copy of this game? How did the physical production seem?
Again, it's much like the gameplay itself. It's simplistic but nice, and what's there is all you need and doesn't have a bunch of extra fluff. So it's got the linen finish cards are great. The bidding tokens are all wood, just painted wood circles. What else have you got? You got the little, and there's just a few tokens that you punch out, and that's it. You're ready to go. There's an optional neoprene mat where you can put out the market, and you can put the resource pieces in a little designated area on the mat, which I ordered. I think it was like $20 from the publisher.
That. That's cool.
And so just a simple, clean production. The box is too big. It could be half the size probably, and everything is still fitting there. But other than that, it's a nice production.
There was 2 things about the production that I thought were kind of fun, and they were completely unnecessary, but I thought they were fun little touches since there wasn't really a whole lot needed here. Number 1 was the round tracker. The round tracker is this little cardboard board that has kind of little triangles cut out of the side, and then the round tracker token that goes next to it is a square. And so as you move it down this board, it kind of works like a gear. The teeth kind of go into the side of the board, so you just move it down. I don't know. It was totally unnecessary. They could have used the token on a track or something. It just added to the theme a little bit about the gears moving, and it was just fun. It was a fun thing to actually interact with and do that just added a little bit that was completely unnecessary. The other thing that I'll mention is just that each of the players have bidding tokens in their own color. and they put a fun little component in there so that you could remember what color your bidding tokens were, because they could all be out on the board. And it was just a little like wooden token that sits in front of you. I think it's wooden. Adam can correct me if I'm wrong there.
It's a cardboard.
Cardboard. Okay,
pieces.
so it's a cardboard token in your player color, but each of them has like a industrialist like icon on it. One of them has a wallet, and one of them has like a top hat, and one of them has, I don't know, a stop, like a watch.
White gloves and stuff.
Yeah, white gloves. So, but just a cute little, like, they could have just made a disc or like a little cardboard shit in the player's color, and it just added a fun little piece to the theme there. So really minor, but I liked it.
Chris is shaking his head.
What?
Well, I said it about the theme. I'll say it about the production. It didn't do this game any favors. If you're gonna have a game that's basically entirely card based, put some cool art on it. I mean, the art in this game consisted kind of a half dozen cartoony pictures of fat pocket watch wearing industrialists. It's kind of like the standard industrialist looking guy, and some factories or production zones that somebody even commented at one point. It's like, how interesting. This place produces coal and yet it has oil rigs on it. You'd think it might be producing oil. And then somebody else noticed, oh yes, well, this other one that does produce oil has oil rigs on it. And we realized that they'd had like 10 different pictures for production zones that seemed completely unrelated, but were repeated over and over again. That just makes me sad, because I love a game with cards that have good art on them. I mean, I love big productions, and in the absence of a big production, a game with just cards can be fun, but you got to do something with those cards. The game was fun, but the production and the theme kind of left me feeling a little bit flat.
Yeah, and I'll counter that just a little bit, in that I thought the factory cards were nice looking, streamlined, and I actually thought the art on them was great for industrial era factories. I thought they looked like industrial era factories, and they were cool. My only complaint was that there was only like 6 or 7 of them, and then they were just from what I could tell, they were just repeated, copied art. And then, like Chris said, the type of factory, like if they had said, yeah, all the oil producing factories look one way, that would have been okay. I can understand why they did that, but they didn't. They seemed to just randomly throw factory art on cards unrelated to the theme, unrelated to what the factory did. So I kind of agree with Chris, but I disagree that it was ugly. I thought they were really nice looking cards and really clean. Yeah, the user experience here too was perfect. Like I said, we didn't have to reference the rule book once. Everything we needed to know was written on the cards. It was very clear when you can convert how much to what type of thing. So mostly I enjoyed the production just fine for the theme that went with it. I wish they would have had more diversity in the card art, but otherwise it was good. What about you, Adam? Anything else to add there on the art?
Yeah, the art is, I'm of two minds. It's like Chris is saying, like you guys are saying, it does have just the repeated stuff, but at least it's colorful. It's not like people coughing black lung in the background.
Now that would have been cool.
It's like factories with smoke coming out of them, but at least they're like in pretty colors with the sun reflecting off of them in low aspect, making a nice sunset or nice sunrise. So, yeah, that's nice. But, I mean, so that's okay, I guess.
wait, hold on. Come on, guys. Have we lowered our standards that much?
No, Chris, come on.
Are there not enough artists out there who would love to make some good art for a board game that we have to rely on okay pictures that, to quote Tim, look like industrial factories?
But
if they didn't look like industrial factories, wouldn't that be really disappointing?
I don't think the art is just okay. I don't know that you could make the art better. Like, the art does exactly what it's trying to do with the theme, and I don't have a problem with the art. I agree they should have put more in there, but there's nothing wrong with the art. Like, what would have made a better piece of factory art when we're really trying to build factories? And in fact, you can go back to our review of Power Grid, and we talk about, Chris, you didn't play that game with us, but we talk about the art there, and they used a different style, but it had the same limitations. There they used a more cartoony style. Here, I think this fit better with what they were trying to go with for the overall production, and I thought it fit just fine. So, no, for me, no complaints about the art. I don't think it's a standards issue. I just, what are you going to have there? It's not going to have like exploding factories or like fantasy factories or something like that. They were ugly.
That'd
like
be cool.
Factories are ugly in industrial Europe.
Exploding fantasy factories. That's going to be. I'm going to design a game, and I'm going to call it Exploding Fantasy Factories. Stand by, Kickstarter coming soon.
Yeah, right. I sound pretty mediocre about it, but I like it. I do like the card
Yeah.
art. The iconography is clean and crisp, like you were saying, Tim, and the somehow they made these industrial factories vibrant and fun to look at. Also, when you upgrade them, expands out to the full width of the card, and the art is slightly different on the upgraded side than the unupgraded side. So that's kind of neat to
I didn't
play.
notice
You
that.
know,
Okay.
yeah. You can play like, well, what changed in this side? And
That's kind of
there's-
cool.
yeah, it is kind of cool. Or there's a couple extra smokestacks, or there's more pollution going out on the upgraded side than the unupgraded side. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like this does, just as well as like Brass Birmingham does, is representing that era, and it's just not it wasn't a pretty time. Like, you don't want to live in London in that time period because it's filthy and dirty and polluted, and that's what we're playing with. So I thought the production was all fine and did what it needed to here. All right, well, let's talk about memorable moments of the game. Adam, any moments that stood out to you with this gameplay?
Maybe not. It's just, I guess the game, the rhythm of this game, you're bidding. So I think if I'm gonna, claim something stood out, it's the rhythm of this game. You're doing your auction, and then you gather up your cards, and it just moves. It moves right along. You get your compensation, or you win your factory. You're resolving all this, the auction. Boom! It just moves right along. You're grabbing these cards. You're setting up how you want these things to cascade and domino effect down to get your points. So I think just the rhythm and the groove of this game is what stands out to me.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Adam. And I'm going to compare it to one more game since I've mentioned several others today, and that's Wingspan. And Wingspan is another engine builder where basically you're building up an engine and then you're executing that engine and you're running it. And I think what this does really well is it gives moments of really high interaction, which is that bidding round. You really are paying attention to what people are doing, you're fighting over it. And then when you go to run your engine, like in Wingspan, you got to sit there and wait for somebody to, walk through 4 different cards and move cards around. And there's no point to doing that. And here, you just get to run your engine. I'm so glad I didn't have to sit there and watch Steve count out resources and trading oil for points and trading, that's great that they did that separate. So this is a unique situation where I'm glad that there was kind of just let me do my own thing. But at least it was interrupted by moments of high interaction and really watching what other people were doing. So I think the pacing worked really well here in the way that those two parts of the round played out in a different way, and it all worked really well.
That's totally what I'm saying. Like in a lot of Euro games, you're sitting there watching the other guy take their turn, and there's nothing you can do about it anyway because a lot of them are just multiplayer solitaire.
Yeah.
So I like that this, splits that up. You got that little duke it out auction interaction, and then you just, okay, now I'm going to just do my own thing, do my little puzzle, my own little solitaire part, and then you go back and reconvene and duke it out again.
I totally agree. For me, the memorable moments all came during the auction phase, and I could mention several, but like one specific example is that I was holding on to my 3 token for most, like everyone had put out their 4s in the first round in the auction, and I was holding on to my 3 token while everyone else is doing stuff, except Steve had his 4. He was the only one that had a 4 left. So there's one building that I don't want the compensation at all. I can't use it. I can't do anything with it. So if I'm going to get it, I want to buy it. So I wait till I've got 1, 2 left and Steve has his 4 left, and that's it. So I'm like, what are the odds? There's 7 cards out there. Is he going to take his 4 and buy this building now? He hasn't bought it the whole time. He must not care about it. So I put my 2 token down there thinking I'm getting a cheap factory, and then he puts his 4 underneath it, and I get absolutely nothing for it. I wasted that whole round. And that's exactly this game. You have to count on people can interrupt you, and you have to think about what token you have left and what do they have left. And I shouldn't have even taken the risk. I knew he could do it, but I took the chance hoping that I'd get something out of it. And so that was really fun to me that I had the shot to do that, and he was able to just he probably wanted something else but knew that I wouldn't get anything out of it, so he did it just to get in my way. It was fun. What about you, Chris? Any moments that stood out?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and truthfully, no. I mean, this just isn't a big moments kind of game. I agree with everything that you guys said about the delight in having this kind of the processing phase where you've gone through the auction and then you're running your factories, and there's a lot of fun in there. But I don't recall there being any big moments that I was like, wow, that just really killed me. Or it really helped me and felt great. I guess if anything, if I had to pick one, I'd say it was when I saw, I was running my factory and I saw the points just started building up in the first game. That was a good feeling, but that's overall, I just didn't get the sense that that's this kind of game. Not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it was a satisfying experience, just not a huge dynamic moment kind of situation.
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. Well, would you request to play it again? Chris, why don't you start?
I wouldn't request to play it again, but I had a lot of fun playing it. So if somebody else brought it to the table, absolutely, I would have a good time. I really did like the fact that it played quickly. It was simple, a lot of depth in the decision making without a lot of rules overhead. And it was a quick game. I mean, we take forever on games. We'll take a 1 hour game and we'll play over the course of 4 hours. Here we took a 45-minute game and we played it over the course of an hour. And that's pretty great because you can get a couple of them in and really kind of get some variety in there, see some different cards, see some different strategies and whatnot. And I really enjoyed that. That said, for some of the reasons I already mentioned, it didn't grab me enough to make me come back and say, I'm just dying to get this one out again. But I did have a lot of fun.
All right. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, Chris, I agree with you. I own this one. I don't know if I would request to play it again. I'm on the fence. It's okay. It doesn't have those huge knockout moments or anything. It does just have a fun kind of strategic puzzle. So if you're looking maybe if I'm looking for something mellow and with a little bit of that auction interaction, then maybe I'd do this one. So yeah, I'm on the fence. I probably wouldn't request to play it again. I don't know. How are you feeling about it, Tim?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of the same as you guys. Like, I enjoyed both plays of this, and I think there are some other little light to mid-weight engine builders that this is better than. It's definitely a little bit of an evolution over some of the things that have been out there. But I 100% for something in the same weight and some similar feels, I would pick Aquatica over this. I think it's a more just fun game. But I would happily play this again. I think it could get a little bit tired if you played it frequently, played a few times in a week, but as a filler, as like, hey, let's kill half an hour before game night starts, it'd be a great game. I'd play it once a week or once a month or whatever. But I think there's a couple other games that fill that slot that I would probably pick over it. So, good, fun game, solid, really streamlined and clean. I think the theme hurt it. I think if it had a more fun or interesting theme. Hey, let me actually stop on that for just a second and say, like, there's another game this reminded me of, which was Res Arcana. And I actually think this is more streamlined than Res Arcana. And I think probably a better game, but I'd rather play Res Arcana than that. And I think it's 100% just the theme. It's more interesting to be, trading in essences to get your dragon to attack somebody else or, acquire this engine rather than build industrial factories. And I think that's really what killed this one for me. So
yeah, that's interesting, Tim. I totally appreciate this game for its streamlinedosity and its gameplay mechanics and just how clean it is. But yeah, it just kind of is like, all right.
Yeah, maybe the mathiness too was a part of it. Just a little bit of that, like just having to calculate how many resources could I trade for points. But I think a lot of little engine builders, Res Arcana, kind of had the same thing. So I don't know. I think that's the only thing I can really point to that really dinged it for me. All right, so I think that'll wrap up our review of Furnace. We're going to be talking about a themed drink for this week, as well as some things that have been on our table right after this. All right, welcome back. So, Chris, why don't you share with us your themed cocktail for people building factories in pre-industrial, or I guess industrializing early Europe or America? Who knows where this game's set up?
I think
Chris,
technically it's Russia.
Why don't you share your...
Russia? Yeah.
Is it really?
I think
Chris,
so.
Oh, okay. I had no idea. Well, Chris, why don't you share your theme cocktail for Furnace tonight?
Could be Russia, it could be America, but it didn't really matter because it's industrializing something. But the really good drink this week, in my opinion. And this week I'm going to start off with the punchline. Our cocktail that we're going to have this week is a wonderful classic called the Rob Roy. And it's probably not all that obvious how we get from a game about 19th century industrialists to a drink named after Rob Roy McGregor, who was a 17th century outlaw and folk hero who many of you may have heard of before. But bear with me for a moment because there is a method to the madness here. So Furnace is fictionalized, but of course the robber barons of the early industrial period were very real. And there's no better known member of the American aristocracy than Mr. Andrew Carnegie, who is the founder of Carnegie Steel, which later became the behemoth that we all know, U.S. Steel. He was also, incidentally, the richest man in America for a few years. So Carnegie was a great American giant, but he was also really proud of his Scottish heritage. He was very Scottish. And so he had a hunger for political influence, and he also had a taste for good Scotch whiskey. And Carnegie famously, or maybe infamously because he caught a lot of flack about it at the time, sent kegs of Dewar's Scotch to the White House for two presidents, Benjamin Harrison and James Garfield. In fact, Carnegie's gift was probably the thing that brought Dewar's to fame on this side of the Atlantic. So by now you probably see where I'm going with this. The Rob Roy is one of the great classic cocktails made of Scotch whiskey. It also happens to be the right era for Furness. The Rob Roy originated at the New York Waldorf Astoria in 1894, just a few years after its more famous brother, the Manhattan. Now, I'm a huge Manhattan lover, and I will drink them all day, every day. At least if I didn't have to work, I would drink them all day, every day. But I have to admit, the Rob Roy was a new one for me, even as much as I love Manhattans. And now I'm in love with this drink too. And if you like the Manhattan, then you're going to be a big Rob Roy fan as well. So let's get to the drink. Here's what you're going to need. 2 ounces of blended Scotch whiskey. Definitely go with the cheap stuff. It's going to work great. It'll be a waste to use your fancy single malt Scotch. And honestly, it would probably unbalance the drink as well. So just go with the cheap stuff. Get something inexpensive. You're going to need 1 ounce of sweet vermouth, and you're going to need bitters. I use the old standby Angostura bitters. So again, 2 ounces of blended Scotch, 1 ounce of sweet vermouth, and Angostura bitters. All you got to do is put the Scotch and the vermouth into a shaker with plenty of ice, add 2 dashes of the bitters, shake it, and then strain it into a coupe or a martini glass. Or if you like ice the way I do, shake it or stir it with ice and then just leave the ice in the glass. That is probably the wrong answer, and the purists will condemn me for that, but that's just kind of how I roll. So you do that, you add a couple of cocktail cherries, toss back a couple of these, and then join your friends for a game of Furnace, and you will be too big to fail in no time.
Hey, Chris, so when you put ice in your drink like this, which it was not intended to have ice in it, do you use a large, like a large single ice cube, or do you just use normal ice cubes out of your freezer?
I do. I use a large ice cube. I have these big square ones. Some people go really fancy and get those spherical ones.
Spheres, yeah.
Yeah, those are crazy. I get just big square ones. I think they work great. They don't dilute your drink too much. There's some drinks. I'm a big fan of tropical cocktails where you actually do want your drink diluted a little bit by the ice, so you shake it with your crushed ice. With this, you really want to get the full flavor of the Scotch and the vermouth. So shake it or don't shake it, just stir it. With a Manhattan, traditionally you stir it. This one, I think you can do either one. And then drink it out of be fancy, drink it out of a cocktail glass, out of a coupe or a martini glass. Or I use a rocks glass with a big ice cube in it, and I think it's just as good. You tried this one, Tim. What did you think of it?
Yeah, so I definitely prefer bourbon over Scotch, and so I would prefer a Manhattan over this anytime. It was still a tasty drink, but I'm not a big fan of Scotch, so I didn't love it. If you like Scotch, adds a little flourish to it, changes it up a little bit, but mostly it tastes like Scotch. Maybe I used the fancy stuff, and so it was a little overbearing.
Well, I'm with you. I like bourbon better myself, but I thought this one was fun. It was a nice change.
All right, so let's talk about some games we've had on our table. And the game I want to talk about it's a game called Cerebria, The Inside World. This game was published by Mind Clash Games. And the designers were Richard Amann and Victor Peter. So Cerebria, if you're not familiar with this game, kind of the gist of it is, if you've ever seen the Pixar movie called Inside Out, this is basically a board game representation of that. In a way, it's essentially what you're doing is it's a competitive game where you're playing as emotions inside, a person. And so you're playing as one of two sides. You're either the bliss side or the gloom side. And the whole point is to essentially have more influence kind of on the overall inside world so that your side wins out. You're trying to, break the balance. And you do that by gaining some points, some really interesting ways. So I'm gonna share a little bit, because it's a very unique game, I'm gonna share a little bit about how the game plays. And then I want to talk about my personal journey experiencing this game. And I think it'll tell you a lot about what to expect if you purchase or play Cerebria. I think it's an interesting story. So basically what it is, it's a board that has 5 different regions on it. And in a way, you can consider this as an area control game. But In between each of those 5 regions is a line, and that dividing line is called the frontier. The way that you take control is that you can essentially put emotions out into these regions on the board. There are slots to put cards, and the emotions are represented by cards. And then the cards have little spaces to put tokens on them, and those tokens represent how much influence that emotion has in this region. So if you're putting an emotion in a region and that's the only emotion there, let's say it has 1 sphere on it on the 1 token, then you've got 1 control there, and then your overall emotion would control that region. If the opponent then puts another emotion in that same region, then they put enough little tokens on it to represent 2, then they would control it. So that gives you just a really general idea of what you're trying to do here, trying to take control. But it's not a traditional area control game. The way that you actually score points, the primary way, is that the game is played with 7 face-up standard, and I'm going to mess up a lot of the terminology here because it is very unique and very specific, but let's just say 7 common goals. And the 7 common goals are different, and so they're randomly put up, and the first goal might say control more regions than the opponent, and the next one might say control more frontiers, and so there's like a few different ways you can score. And then both teams also has a face down deck of these goals, and each round you get to look at the top one. So while you're playing, you're going to have a face up goal that you're going after, and you're going to have a face down goal that you're going after. And there's a way that the players can actually trigger the scoring. When do you check these goals? And the way you're doing that is every round, aside from being able to take 3 actions, you can also pull some of this resource called willpower. They're represented by these little gems. And most of the actions you can take in the game, you have to spend the willpower to do it. So one of the ways you're going to get willpower, you're going to pull out of these 5 regions in the central area of the board. And when you take that willpower, it's called the absorb ability, then you're going to get between 2 and 4 tokens, depending on whether or not you have frontiers in the same area. When that little section is empty of willpower, then a scoring region triggers. So the whole game is about trying to set yourself up to win 1 or both conditions, hope that your opponent is not winning 1 or 2 of the conditions that they can win, and then trigger that scoring situation that happens. Now, this is made to be a team game, a 4-player team game. And so the rounds always have, or the turns always happen, so you have a person from the bliss side plays, then a person from the gloom side, then a person from the bliss side, and a person from the gloom side. So it's a constant battle, a constant push back and forth, at least for that common goal. Everybody knows what it is, so you know that you can, and it's all visible on the board what you can do. The only thing that's hidden are players' emotions in their hands, which are cards that they can play out later. But nobody knows what your hidden goal is. I think it's called aspirations, but whatever the hidden goal is. And so you're fighting for that one and trying to stop the opponent from winning the main goal and trying to trigger a scoring when you have the best position, whether it's having both those goals or maybe it's just having one of them and hoping that the opponent doesn't have both. Sometimes, when I've been playing this, you'll try to trigger the scoring when you're going to lose the least points, because if that next person gets their turn and they trigger the scoring, they're going to hit both the goals and you might not hit either if they do the right things. So it's a lot of paying attention how you can block the other people from doing this. That is the general game, and there's a lot more going into this. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting to mention is that each player has a player board that has 5 different types of actions on there. The way that the rules teach this is that there's a basic game and then there's the full game. And the basic game has some rules removed to kind of simplify it for people getting into it. The basic game's still great, but then it adds levels of complexity on if you play the full game. So each of the player boards has 5 different actions, but only 4 of them are available in the basic game. But each of those actions can be upgraded, and you can upgrade them by discarding one of the emotion cards out of your hand. So when you're about to do that action, let's say the move action, you could discard a card out of your hand, and you could upgrade your move to allow your character to move 2 spaces, or to move onto an opponent's space, or to reduce the cost of that action. And the other actions you can do are invoke, which is how you play emotions out on the board, quell, which is an expensive action but allows you to remove an opponent's tokens off their emotions, and if there are no tokens, then they lose that emotion off the board. And then fortify, which allows you to put this token on the board that basically increases your influence in that realm. I've been calling them regions. I think it's realm. And then there's also a way to turn those into points later in the game. So it's a very unique gameplay. I want to talk a little bit about the production as well before I talk about my journey here. First of all, every one of these, I'm going to jump into this. I'm going to jump right into the journey. What was my experience playing this game? So I talked to Mind Clash Anachrony, if any of you listen, Anachrony is my favorite game of all time right now. Absolutely love it. And after playing that, I thought, they did such an amazing job of this full package, this really fun gameplay, amazing production, amazing theme. I've got to see what else Mind Clash has to offer. But when I was looking at Cerebria seems like such a unique game. It's expected to be played as a team game, although you can play it 2 or 3 players. There's some unique rules for that. But I was like, I just don't know if I'm going to get this game played. So does it make sense for me to buy it? Let me talk to Mind Clash. And so Mind Clash sent me a copy of Cerebria as a review copy. And that helped me. I don't think I would have taken the jump into this if I didn't get it. The first part of my experience is I opened the box, and it is the most beautiful production and artwork that you've ever seen. And in fact, I texted Chris and Adam right after opening the box and taking the board out, which is this huge board that unfolds from 9 sections. And it's just beautiful. And the artwork in this whole thing it's kind of like this slightly cartoony, abstracted art that's supposed to represent these different emotions and spirits that you're playing with. But it's also got an element of whimsy, in some cases creepiness to it. And it's just very unique and very, very exciting, to be honest. Like, everything about the production when I'm opening this thing up is just gorgeous, and it just grabs me in, and I just want to learn about these emotions. I want to learn about this world that we're living in. So that was the first thing that happened. Then I open up the rule book. The way I usually learn games is I open up the rule book and I do the setup. I set up the game so that I can look at the components as I'm reading through the rules. And the first step of the setup was build your deck. So this is a game that, it's just a traditional board game, except that there are rules in there that you can actually essentially create the deck that you're going to be playing off of the game. Now, they have a recommended setup for a first play, which is, a specific 16 specific spirits that you would put into your starter deck. They're a little bit simpler abilities that you can use, or emotions rather, except that the way that the decks were packaged in the box, all the different emotions were combined. None of the starter ones were together. The different colors were all combined. The upgraded emotions, they're just these 2 big piles of cards, and it must have taken me an hour to sort through the cards and just get my starting decks together.
So I have a quick question for you, Tim. Is this how the game would arrive if you bought it new, or was it because it was a review copy?
No, this was a brand new retail edition. So it was all packaged exactly as you would receive it new.
Okay.
And so my point of saying all that is that getting into this game, once I got past the production and actually tried to play it, it kind of gave me some hurdles. And that was the first of them. Probably the biggest one that they should have corrected. And I understand there's production reasons to do that. But if they would have set up one package of cards that were like, these are your starter emotions, open this up, ignore this other package. A Feast for Odin does that. They say, don't even touch these other cards until you're experienced with the game and you want to play it. And then it's really easy. You just open up this one package and you shuffle it. So this was a huge barrier. It took me about an hour just to get these cards sorted out and put them in, set up the starting decks. And then I was ready to play. Except there's no for all the bizarre rules that are in here, and all the things that you can do. There's all these actions represented on your action board, and then all of the emotions all do something unique. Every single one of them. I think there's 32 different emotions or maybe it's 16 different emotions for each side, bliss and gloom. And then there's another 10 to 12 upgraded emotions. All of them have unique things that they do. There isn't a single word of text on any of this stuff. It's all iconography, and it's all unreadable iconography. None of it makes sense at all when you're looking at this thing. So that was my next step, is to try to start to sort through the rules, but there was no way to actually think about what am I going to be doing with this thing when I do it? And that was another challenge I ran into. Now, I want to mention that I think there's a good reason for that, and that actually pays off once you get to know the game, because all of it's thematic. First of all, the art that's used to represent all this iconography ties right into the kind of whimsical, bizarre art that's used throughout. So it's drawn nicely and it matches in perfectly.
I have another question for you, Tim. As you're going through this process, you've got this review copy, you're sort of obligated to get it out there, learn the rules, play it. Was there ever a point where you're like, I don't want to do this because there's too much stuff? Or were you like, I'm gonna follow through no matter what? Did it ever become work, or was it always fun?
It did in a way that only one other game has ever done for me, and that was Mage Knight. And Mage Knight was a game I probably had to spend about as much time going through the rule book and trying to learn. But I did feel that obligation here. So I couldn't say I'm tired of doing this today, I'm going to put it back on the shelf, I'll come back to it in 6 months when I feel like I just have some brain space. I felt obligated to do it. And that's okay. Again, I'll get to the point that I'm glad that I went through that process. but this is work to get into. There's a high barrier of entry here. And I finally got, there's one more point I want to talk about. I'll circle back to here, but I'll tell you, I finally got to the point where I had a game set up, I had the two sides set up, and I was able to actually play through turns. I knew how the game played. And I texted Chris and Adam and I said, I finally understand how to play this game. And the barrier to get here was sky high. And Adam texted back, he said, was it worth it? And I said, I don't think so. I don't think it was worth it. I don't know though. I haven't played it with other people. I haven't had the full experience yet. But man, it feels like a lot of work to get here.
Do you feel like, Tim, this is the kind of game that you could get to the table with anything other than a group of other hardcore gamers?
Well, no. I mean, this is a heavy game. And so I would play it with you guys in an instant. And I'll tell you a little bit about my actual experience playing it with new players. But I would never even attempt to play this with my wife or even Jen. They just wouldn't enjoy getting into a game this heavy. I think you could, because to be honest, I'll tell you one thing about this is that once I actually learned it and then taught it to play with other people, the teach was not that bad. The teach was pretty straightforward. The hard part was actually understanding how everything works together and learning it. For me, this may not be the same for other people. For me, it was very hard to comprehend. I'm gonna give you a perfect example. I have so I mentioned that each of the emotion cards that you can play with and all the upgraded ones all have unique abilities on them, and there's no text written on them. So how do you reference them? Well, they give you a player sheet for each side in the box, and it's double-sided, and there's 8 emotions in 4 different types of emotions, and so that's 32 different emotions on each of these, one for the bliss side and one for the gloom side, and they're all unique. And the way that you actually would look at this is you can't guess what the icons do. Even after you're playing the game and know all the iconography, pretty much still, if I pulled a card out of the box that I hadn't seen before, I will not be able to tell you what it does. I'll have to reference the sheet for it. Here's how it reads, right? Each of these emotions is supposed to represent a specific emotion. For example, affection, adoration, courage, valor. These are the type of emotions. And they're all illustrated with these cute little, like, bizarre creature-like representations of what these emotions might look like, and they're adorable. But here's how the rules read. If I pull up courage, for example, here's how it starts. Sometimes you have to take a stand. If you put courage into play in a triad that influences a gloom-controlled frontier, you gain 1 action.
Well, duh.
So first of all, they added thematic text into all of these, which is awesome. Once you get to know the game and you're thinking about it, and they have something that represents what you're doing, that's great. But half the words I just read to you guys there probably don't make any sense until you understand how the rules of the game work, because every component of the game uses terminology that's specific to this game. Nothing is just like that's a draw pile or that's a token or whatever. Everything is represented by something that's supposed to represent what these emotions are doing and interacting with and everything like that. Here's another great one. Sociability. Here's its skill, or here's its explanation. Let's be friends. When you put sociability into play, if there's another bliss emotion in the same triad, give sociability a +1 intensity token. It's so cute, right? Sociability, of course he wants to be next to other characters. But when I was learning this game and trying to read this sheet, I had no idea how that worked or what it meant. And the iconography still doesn't clearly describe that. So all that to basically say is that the barrier for me to get into this game was really high, and it was a challenge. And I was frustrated at points. So I did learn how to play it, and I set up a 2-player game, and as I usually do when I'm teaching myself, I played 2-handed, basically both sides, played through several turns, felt I had a grasp on it, and I put it away, because that's not the way I want to play through the whole game. I just wanted to learn it that way. But I couldn't get it out of my head. So I set it up the next day, and I started another game like that and kind of went through those rounds, but I was like, I'm missing something by not interacting with other people and not letting them take their turns. I want to really experience this. They do have a solo mode in here, which is also very good, but very heavy to run. So it's one that's going to take some brain power to wrap your head around and learn to do. I was able to get through a few turns with that, and that's going to take some work, probably a little heavier than I want to do with the solo. So I set up a game with my local game group here, and I was like, listen, people, I need to play this game with the full group. I got to get 3 other people together. And so I managed to put a group of 4 together, and we played a few days ago.
So were these willing participants, or were they like reluctantly in, or were they like, let's do it? Were they gung-ho about it, or how were they?
No, it's actually cool because I put it out. I'm in a local game group that meets once or twice a week, and I just put it into this Facebook group. And one guy was like, that's my favorite game of all time. I'm in. So he's played it dozens of times. He knows the game well. Another guy had played it once before, like 2 years ago. So he kind of knew it, and he remembered having a great time with it. So he was excited. And then one other guy I played a few games with, he was like, yeah, I'll play with you, no problem. So it's 4 people. it was awesome because there was another person there that knew the game really well. And so when I wasn't quite sure what an icon meant or something, then he was able to help me through it and get us running. So we sat down, set up the 2 separate sides. And guys, this was one of the best gameplay experiences I've ever had. It was so much fun. And basically, like I said, you're taking your turn, and it's team-based, right? So there's no hidden information from your team member. You're sitting right next to each other. You both can look at that face-down objective card that you're going after, and you can look at each other's emotions in your hands. So that's the only hidden information. Everything else is public on the table. And so we're thinking like, okay, so if we got to move this over here, we got to remove that guy, we got to put a token here, and then we'll be set up for both objectives. But I can't trigger the scoring this round because there's too much willpower in the center. So if they then go on their turn and then they trigger the end game, they would have to do this and this in order to get there. And so basically every turn is you working with your teammates saying, what can we set up in this turn to hopefully prep you for your next turn without letting them take advantage of the game. It was such a blast. I had so much fun doing this. I way more than I ever expected. I'm not a big fan of cooperative games, mainly because there are some people that will quarterback in a game and they'll just kind of take over all the decisions in the game. And that didn't happen with this at all. I think it has the potential to. So I think if you were playing with somebody that's going to quarterback a game, you're going to end up with one person playing, the whole side. And I don't think that's the most fun way to go. But we had such a fun time trying to figure out this puzzle. It was such a push and pull. Every time we thought we set ourselves up for the next turn to hit a scoring and trigger both the objectives, and they would do just the right thing, even though they didn't know what our objective was. They'd managed to do just the right thing to stop us from getting our private objective, or really mix up the board for us in a way that we couldn't address it. It's just it was such a change from what when I started in this game and how hard it was to get into. It was a blast. And the funny thing is, there was one guy, right, that was at the table that day that had never played it before. It took us about 15 minutes to get him up to speed to where he could play it. Now, the other guy that was sitting next to him had played once before, so he was able to help him through some of the turns. And of course, we're referencing the sheets all the time about what do these emotions do. But it was not hard to teach when you've had the things in front of you and you have somebody that can explain it to you in a reasonable way without having to read through all this jargon and all this terminology in the rule book. It was not that hard to get into. And so honestly, this game is now one of my favorite games. And I am just going to be looking for the right opportunities to play it. And that's one of the other challenges, is that it is made to be a 4-player game. If you play 2 players, you can either play with just one of the spirits on each side, so 1-player board, or you can play with 2 player boards on each side. I think either would work okay. So I think it's still a solid 2-player game.
So, Tim, I'm always really skeptical of team games, and I'm thinking of games like Star Wars Rebellion or Batman Gotham City Chronicles, because it feels like so often you're either going to end up in a situation like what you described, where you've got a quarterback, where it's really going to be one person playing, or it really is just better handled as a 2-player game where one side is controlled by, one player. What makes this game work as a team game?
I don't know exactly, Chris, and because I haven't just played it with both spirits 2-player, I don't know that it would necessarily be a worse experience there, but I can tell you that I had a blast working with my teammate here, and the other team said the same thing when they were done. We were all just conspiring. There was a little bit about that, you're talking about things that are public on the table, and you have to communicate verbally, but you have to do it. Try to be a little quiet about it. Try to be a little secretive about it without sharing what you're actually what you're planning to do. And so there was just something that was really fun about coordinating and working with that other person. And neither of us were quarterbacking. It was both oh, what do you think about doing that? Okay, I can see what you're saying. So we were both very willing to compromise and listen to the other person's ideas and try to come to what was the best solution for that time. I think what made it really work as a team game, though, is that it is heavy and there's a lot to think about. And so having 2 brains sitting there and processing all this information was actually great. It really felt like it took a little bit of the weight off of me to say, hey, I don't have to spend another 20 minutes figuring out if this is the right move and mapping it all out, because I just had someone confirm me or give me this little tip that I missed. And so I think that's what actually made it work really well. It was just that it took some of the brain power down off of it.
So how do you score points in this game? How do you gain ground? How do you do this game?
Yeah, I didn't want to go too deep into the mechanisms just because it is strange and heavy, but I'll answer that because I think it's a really wonderful question. So in the middle of the board, I mentioned that there's these 5 little spaces where you can get willpower, 5 or 6, I can't remember now. But basically, this is a little rotating thing.
So I'm just saying 5. Sorry.
Oh, 5. Yeah, thanks. That's what I thought. I thought there was one for every realm. That makes sense. So this is a little rotating thing, and this is like a little dual layer board that sits in the middle and rotates. And so the willpower sits in there, and then you can pull them out. So it's kind of like little bowls in there. Every time you take willpower, it rotates. And the reason that matters, well, there's a couple, but one is that whenever you take willpower out of those, you also get an associated benefit that's printed on that little section. So each one gives you different benefits. But right in the middle of all those little bowls is a place to stack a tower. And both players have a number of little tower sections, big plastic chunky pieces that kind of stack on top of each other. And that's kind of the whole idea, is that this tower that you're building in the middle is representing your influence over this inside world. And the Gloom has purple pieces and Bliss has orange pieces. And each team has a few 3-point sections, which are a little smaller, or 5-point sections. And then they all have one cap on top that's worth 4 points. So whenever you meet one of these objectives, if you meet one of them on your turn, you get to put one of your 3-point tokens into the middle. If you meet both of your objectives when a scoring happens, you get to put one of the 5-point sections in the middle. And the game ends either when all 7 of these scoring objectives have finished. So each time you do a scoring, one of them gets flipped, it scores and it gets flipped over. Or when somebody runs out of the piece they're going to put in the middle, then they can put their cap on top, and that's worth 4 points. So that's essentially how the game ends. And really in the basic game, that's the only way you score points. You're just trying to hit these objectives, and depending on how many you hit in that turn is how many points that round was worth to you. There's one little interesting catch-up mechanism that happens, that if your opponent hits a 5-point scoring and you don't, either you get none or 3, then you get to remove one of the upcoming objective cards that are coming. So you can kind of maybe remove one even available to score that you can't catch up with. They've got too many frontiers, you're never going to get it. You can just take it out of the game. So it gives you a little bit of an opportunity to influence what you're going to score on in the future. So that was pretty cool. And then in the full game, there's also another way to score, and that's called intentions. Intentions are a little bit more powerful actions that you can do once in a while. And when you trigger them, you get an extra point for them. Or if you can trigger more than one in a turn, you get 2 points for every one you do after that. So for example, one of the actions that you can do is to quell, which is to remove tokens off an opponent's card, but it requires a special resource called ambition. You can see all this terminology is getting pretty crazy, but if you can use one of your ambition tokens to quell, then that's one of the special intention actions. And so that would give you a point. But if you can both quell and then also manage to upgrade all 4 of one type of action, then you can get an extra 2 points by doing 2 of those special actions. And there's a couple other ones that do that. Why this is really fun is, one, the whole game is that back and forth. And so, it can come down to like 1 point at the end, but that gives you another little thing, the little goal to go after. But also the scoring tracker that you move when you're doing these intentions is that they have little bonuses printed on them every 3 or 4 spaces. So sometimes it can be really fun to be like, okay, I'm going to do this to get this 1 point, and that's going to give me this extra bonus token, this willpower, that then I can use to do another action this turn. So it gives you a little way to combo things and kind of chain stuff up. So that's the other way that you can score in the game if you're playing the full game. The way we played the other day, because I really wanted to try that intentions track, was we played what was essentially the basic game with some different emotions mixed in. We didn't just start with the basic emotions, and then we also used the intentions so that we were scoring on that track. But we didn't use some of the other things in the full game, like there's an action that you can do called Empower, which allows you to replace one of your emotions that you put on the board with an upgraded emotion that's in this separate deck that you can pull out, and it's more powerful. And then there's also completely asymmetric sides of the opposite side of the board, where the different powers you do can do completely different things. And so, then again, you just have a ton more iconography that you have to learn, and every player has to kind of understand that. So I wouldn't necessarily want to play with that in the first couple of games, but after everybody knows the game, then they can kind of own their iconography and understand what it does and everything. Do you guys have any idea how it plays after I explained all that? Does that make any sense to you?
I'm pretty lost. I have a picture of the board up, and I see all this stuff out there. And I see what you're talking about, but then hearing the terminology and, I can't follow at all how it's going to play out.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time probably confusing the hell out of everybody that's listening, but it was for a reason, and it's because I want you to understand that there is a high barrier to entry here, and you have to be ready to get in here and try to figure it out. Now, there are some teaching videos, gaming rules has a great teaching video, which was a little helpful to me after I had kind of set it up, read the rule book, and was starting to grasp it. Then he helped me cement some of the things. But if I just watched that video, I still probably wouldn't have a good understanding how to play, even though he explains it really well. It's just too many weird things going on and too much weird terminology to just be able to internalize for me with that normal learning process. So this took a couple layers for me to get through. Also, when Mind Clash sent me this game, they let me know that there is a full like digital training video that they put together, interactive training video that they put together. It's in beta right now, but if you're interested in it, I can send you the link for it. I don't think there's a problem with me sharing it. And it's pretty cool because it starts from the moment you open the box, and it tells you how to sort those cards out that I struggled with, and then it kind of tells you what the different components do, and it quizzes you like, hey, I just taught you what a realm does. Now if you put this guy here, who controls the realm? So it really will teach you how to play the game. I wanted to try to learn it the way I traditionally would to see what kind of, what it would be like. I might have been better off if I just used that video to start with, but also I can tell you that it's a little bit, I think it works well, but it's a little slow. You're waiting for this digital voice to read the text that it's got on the screen. So I think it'd be a little bit of a slow process on its own. But I think for some people, that's going to be a really great kind of way to learn. For me, I wish that it was a little bit just easier to get into from a rules perspective, because what you guys experience with me teaching it or like explaining to you is exactly what you would experience reading out of the rule book, with maybe some illustrations that help you along a little bit. And so it did take a lot of effort for me to get into it. But that said, I had a total blast playing it. It was so much fun. I actually thought it was going to play a long time. I thought it was going to be like a 3 to 4 hour game with the teach, but we taught a new guy and we got it knocked down in about 2.5 hours, which was a great amount of gameplay. We had a great experience. You do sit there and wait about 10, 15 minutes while you're waiting for someone to figure out their 3 actions and talk through it with their teammate. But at the same time, you're talking with your teammate and you're trying to figure out what you're planning to do on your turn. So we never felt like we were just sitting around waiting. It never felt like downtime. Maybe that's the other advantage of playing teams, is that you have that opportunity to spend it and interact with somebody instead of just thinking to yourself, So I think that was probably one of the reasons why it was a little bit better experience doing it in a team-based way. But I had a total blast with it. I really want to play this with you guys at TimCon, especially now that I know we can get it done in like 2.5, 3 hours. It's not going to be an all-afternoon event, and I think you guys are going to love it. I can't wait. I would play with any one of you. I'd love to be teammates with any one of you to sit down and work through this puzzle and see how you think about things differently than I do. Yeah, I just had an absolute blast. So that was my experience with it. A little bit heavy to get into, but if you have someone that can teach it to you, you should absolutely play it because you'll get right into it. But if you buy it, keep that in mind.
Well, I saw the same pictures that Adam was looking at, and the game just looks beautiful. I would play it just for that,
Yep.
and it sounds like from what you're saying with the gameplay, it would actually be justified. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to trying it.
And I'll tell you two more things about it. Number one is that the production is so amazing that this was a game, you guys know that I keep a really small collection of games. I keep only games that I know that are going to get played frequently, that I have people that I'm going to play them with. And so there's really no other game that I would keep just to have it in my collection. And I couldn't bear the thought of having this leave my collection after I had it in my hands. The box art is beautiful, the components are beautiful, and I was like, even if I hate this game today, I want to take a stab at it and come back to it 6 months down the road and try it again, because it was in my mind all the time after I started to learn it, and I just loved everything about the production. So that's one thing to note. It is just a beautiful, very unique production.
Does this game compare with any other game you've ever played?
No, I can't think of anything. There are, some minor similarities, but there's, even when you talk about it, it does have an area control element, but nothing like you've played anywhere else. And the area control rules of it are so interesting. Like if you have a character in a frontier, then it influences the realm next to it. Unless there's an opposing color in the realm next to that, then that blocks off that emotion. But if your color is there, then it shares with it. So there's some of these rules that are not hard at all to grasp while you're sitting there playing it, but really hard to wrap your head around, until you start actually playing with it. So it does not compare in any way that I can think of. One of the things I really liked about it too was this fact that all of the scoring was driven by these goals, and it was just it was not a Feld. This is not a point salad. It was about I've got 2 specific things I can try to get done before a scoring happens. And after I've triggered that, that particular scoring realm, I'll never see that private scoring again. It gets discarded from the game. So now the thing that I just worked for to accomplish this round will probably never be good for me again the rest of the game. So it's just like all these little mini puzzles that you're trying to solve with your teammate and hope that your opponents don't block you. And they have some information about what they can block, but they don't have all of it. It's very cool. One other thing I want to mention about the production, because I think you guys will really find this fascinating. The production's awesome. The one thing that fell a little bit short for me is that the main characters, which everybody plays with one main character, which are called spirits on the board. So for example, empathy, kindness, hatred, misery, those are some of the main spirits. And then there's a whole bunch of little emotions that are on these cards. But the main spirits are represented in the base retail box by standees. The standees are beautiful. They match the art. They're colorful. They're quirky, but it's just a cardboard standee. And that's just something that's never very appealing to me from a production perspective. So that was my one. And the worst part about it was that when this came out on Kickstarter, you had an option to go in with a pledge that gave you full painted, pre-painted minis for this game. So that was even, I think if I didn't know those existed, the standees might not have bothered me quite as much. No, they're still beautiful, don't get me wrong. But I was really like, oh, that's frustrating. So when I told this group that I wanted to play with them, one of the guys was like, hey, do you want me to bring my Kickstarter copy so you can see what the pre-painted minis look like? And I was like, absolutely. So I set up my copy, but I just grabbed the pre-painted minis out of his. And you guys, these are the most beautifully, I can't believe that these came from the factory like this, because they're detailed. There's blending of colors. Some of the minis are not even just plastic. Like one of them, Hatred, which is supposed to look like fire, is made out of like this clear see-through red plastic. So they didn't just use standard plastic on all of them. They gave them all their unique components, super detailed, super well painted and beautiful. So I reached out to Mind Clash, after, and I said, hey, before I talk about this, is there going to be a way to get these pre-painted minis again? Are you guys going to do another Kickstarter or anything? And they said, no, that's a one-time thing. At which point I immediately went to eBay and way overpaid for somebody else's Kickstarter copy of these minis, because I love this game so much and I just want that extra added experience. So just so you know, that was my only complaint. It's still beautiful though, and some people are going to have these really beautiful pre-painted minis. Probably not necessary. I really got a lot of joy out of this game. Even the frustrations of the experience, I'm glad I went through it. And even when I was frustrated with it, it kept sticking in my mind and I wanted to go back and learn it and play through it and things like that. So this is a game that I'm glad I went through the effort with and has really sold me on Mind Clash. If they were able to do Anachrony and then do this completely crazy, unique experience and make it just hit on all cylinders, aside from the learnability of it, I can't wait to see what else they got to do. What else they're going to come up with. So that was my long journey and adventure into Cerebria. It just I had to share that experience because it was very unique for me to go through. All right,
that's amazing.
So,
that's amazing. That game has always been like fascinating to me, and I've heard so many good things, and I've heard the barrier to entry is high.
Yeah.
And now I just want to play it.
It sounds like the exact opposite of what we were talking about tonight. Something where there is so much uniqueness to it that it pulls you in with the uniqueness, even if there's some challenges associated with the mechanisms.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't even think that there are problems with the mechanisms. And I think what they did that made it hard, which is all this, abstract terminology, actually really works when you're playing the game and you get into it. And then you're just like in the middle of this theme. It's just dripping. Everything makes sense once you get to playing it. It's just so hard to learn there. So I actually think that other than the way that they packed the cards when I took them out of the box, there's nothing else I would recommend that they change to the game. That's the only thing, and I'm sure that's a manufacturing quirk that they may not have any control over. But if they could pre-package those so that the starting cards were just set aside so that you didn't have to go through that extra hurdle to get the game set up and started. Otherwise, I think everything that they did was for a purpose, and I think the purpose pays off if you're willing to put in the work for it. All right, that's enough about Cerebria, the Inside World. All right, I think that'll wrap up this episode of Board Game Hot Takes. If you'd like to ask any questions about the games we've been playing or chat with us, reach out to us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at BG_Hot Takes. You can find us on Instagram at BG_Hot Takes, and you can find us on Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Later, folks.
Bye-bye.